Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Drew Clark. I'm the CEO and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and very excited to welcome you today, September 11th, 2024, obviously a very historic day over the years. We're going to be talking today about data centers, all right, and all of the things that are going on with data centers. Just as an introduction for those of you who don't know much about Broadband Breakfast, and we welcome many new people, new faces for our discussion here today. This is Broadband Breakfast Live Online. We're a weekly webcast, free weekly webcast every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. And we talk about better broadband, better lives. What does that mean? Well, for us, it means higher capacity internet that is, always on, always available, ready to do the tasks that we need in our economy and infrastructure, and how that leads to, applications, uses, the tools that people use their broadband for, right? We don't want to just focus on the feeds and speeds, the wires and the wireless connections, or the data centers in the cloud that support the cloud, but we want to focus as well on how that translates to better educational opportunities, better healthcare, better opportunities for economic development, or more civil discourse in our political environment. All of these things are part of the ambit of what we cover in thinking about better broadband, better lives at Broadband Breakfast. We also encourage all of you who are new to Broadband Breakfast to join, become a free member of the Broadband Breakfast community. You get access, obviously, to these free webcasts and also to all of our expert opinion pieces and a certain number of stories, free news stories on Broadband Breakfast. But we hope many of you will also become members of the Broadband Breakfast Club. That's our premium product available at $99 a month or $590 a year. Or if you are part of the community, then it's $490 a year. So we hope that you will sign up. That gives you unlimited access to the hundreds of stories we publish every month, more than 7,000 stories on, in our archive, and also exclusive reports, which are only available to Broadband Breakfast Club members, and charts, premium charts and data that we've begun to publish, and all the videos of our in-person events. And speaking of which, we're coming up on our sixth annual Broadband Breakfast, or I should say, Digital Infrastructure Investment event. This is an in-person event bringing together the broadband operators and the financial service professionals that will enable the digital infrastructure to take shape. Later in the program, I'll send a link to a couple of the historic events. And the reason I'm saying this is because next week's digital infrastructure investment is all in on open access, and we're really excited to dig into that subject. But last year's digital infrastructure investment, we had a really fascinating discussion on last mile BEAD needs more exchange points to be effective. And one of our three panelists, maybe more than one, but at least one, is very knowledgeable about this topic. And one of the partners he's working with was at this digital infrastructure investment last year. So digital infrastructure investment is the videos are available to Breakfast Club members, and you also get a discount on the registration price of $245 to attend this all-day event at Clyde's of Gallery Place. Well, enough about that. Let's quickly thank the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast that enable these free weekly webcasts to take place. Our sponsors are Utopia Fiber, Comcast, SmartWave Technologies, Ookla, which does some pretty amazing data collections for broadband analysis, Wesco, Coos Systems, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, G-Fiber or Google Fiber, Broadband Now, WISPA, Broadband Without Boundaries, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Thank you to our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to keep doing this free programming without your support. And so that is very, very valuable to keep this community together. Let's go ahead and change the view to our four three panelists, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce them in the order that they will speak. So we're going to hear first from William Thompson, Bill Thompson. He's the Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at DC Blocks. And DC Blocks is a multi-tenant data center operator in the Southeast. Bill is a technology industry veteran and has developed and marketed numerous enterprise software, SaaS, and cloud infrastructure products geared to B2B markets. And he's also worked with leading tech and telecom companies, including AT&T, NTT, CBeyond, and Vonage. And he's also served on the Technology Association of Georgia Product Management Society board. So, Bill, thanks for being with us, bringing your expertise in data centers to this discussion. Bill will be followed by Melissa Farney. Melissa is the Director of Marketing at Tech Fusions, and she runs the data-centered column for Mission Critical magazine. Farney is an award-winning data center leader with nearly 20 years of experience in marketing digital technologies, and we are super excited to hear how she brings the issues of critical infrastructure, including data centers, as well as power grid and prioritizing sustainability. And then our last speaker, last but definitely not least, is Hunter Newby. Hunter, thanks for making time to be with us. He is an American entrepreneur, I might even say visionary entrepreneur, investor, conservationist, and owner of Newby Ventures. His primary field of interest is network infrastructure, and he was the co-founder, chief strategy officer, and director of Telex, where he pioneered the carrier-neutral Meet Me room and the development of carrier hotels and data centers in the United States. And since he sold Telex, he's been and continued to be quite involved in carrier, or I should say network neutral infrastructure business, including a very exciting project I'm sure you'll mention more about with Connected Nation. So look forward to hearing more about that, and also the interplay between the internet exchange points and or specifically the way that these points and the Meet Me concept interfaces with the data center concept. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it over to Bill. I'm going to turn the camera to you. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on the issues that and I didn't really tee up the issues. They're on the page for the event. Certainly environmental issues are out there, but there's just so much talk more and more about data centers, their pivotal role in fueling our online lives, and how we manage the investment in the backbone, the data center, going forward. So with that, the floor is yours, Bill.
Thank you, Drew. And I'm going to start with, what is driving a lot of this data center development. And I'm going to go through a little bit of a history of our company, because I think we're relatively young in the industry, founded in 2014, but DC Blocks being a data center owner-operator, we've kind of grown with the trends. And you'll see we've got ourselves involved in a number of different data center builds with a variety of different customers, as well as fiber build outs. So I'm going to take you through a little history, but the first question is, what is driving all this data center development? And it really is hitting historical marks. And the simple answer is, anybody else use one of these things? This device, along with other computers and devices, is to a large extent, it is us who is driving the need for new data centers. All the apps that you're using for personal use or for business use, from online banking to your social media to audio and video streaming, it's in online shopping. All of these things are requests that come from a device like this, go over some sort of cell or terrestrial networks, end up in a data center with a computer that's going to respond to that request in a very short period of time. And so our increasing use of this, more and more applications being driven by that, and our use of it is what's driving the need for more data center space. Imagine Amazon, right? I can no longer have to go to a shopping mall. If I have any kind of product, I can go online to Amazon, I can order it, and in many cases, I can have it in my house this afternoon. And so leading companies like Amazon and those technology leaders are setting the bar for what customers and consumers are expecting for any business they do business with, right? And that spans the gamut, from the healthcare organizations and banks that I deal with. They're all having to digitally transform to provide their services 24/7 to meet consumer and customer expectations. And if they don't, what we like to say is they will either digitally transform or die. I mean, because that is the new economy. Digital infrastructure is required to support it all. And fortunately, we're in the digital infrastructure business. So that's what starts it all. Our little bit of a history, we started out building data centers in small growing cities that didn't quite frankly have a state-of-the-art data center they could rely on. Cities like Birmingham, Alabama, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Greenville, South Carolina. And quite frankly, the larger data center operators were fine building in the NFL cities. They had plenty of demand. There was plenty of work for them, and they were making lots of money, but no one had spread data centers to some of those smaller markets. So we started doing that, and of course, offered. Our background is technology entrepreneurs and telecom folks. We knew connectivity was really important, so we built a southeastern regional network to make sure those data centers were connected. We have dozens and dozens of carriers built in as well to provide that connectivity required to move data in and out of the facilities. We had the opportunity to build a specialized data center, which is a cable landing station in Myrtle Beach. And this was, again, we're focused in the Southeast. The Southeast is a very growing market. That cable landing station is a specialized data center that connects subsea cables from a variety of countries and then connects them to terrestrial networks here in the US and transmits the data from this region to international destinations. As part of that project, we figured out, well, this data coming in from outside, the country is going to need terrestrial networks. We acquired assets and resources to get ourselves into being able to build dark fiber routes, because the customers of that cable landing station, and right now 100% of them are hyperscale customers like Google and Meta, bringing in traffic from international destinations. We acquired the assets and some resources to give us the capability to build a dark fiber route connecting Myrtle Beach across the Southeast, east to west route, which didn't exist previously, to the internet exchanges within Atlanta that Hunter knows oh so well. We're into 56 Marietta and such. And so that provided, not only connectivity to that internet exchange across the region to international destinations, but also to west of Atlanta, Lithia Springs, which is an emerging data center hub here in the southeastern United States. So that was, that got us into the fiber business as well. And then, with those relationships and with the trends happening of deploying new hyperscale data centers, as many know, the hyperscalers are driving a lot of the new data center development. So we found ourselves now, we have 3 locations, 2 in the Atlanta, region, as well as Berkeley County, South Carolina, that are hyperscale ready sites. They have the land we have already acquired. There is power that we've reserved, and we are talking with all the hyperscalers who are coming into the region, not just, to DC Block's sites, but to many other sites. And what they're doing is they're bringing their cloud regions and they're bringing their technology to be closer to their end users. And this is happening throughout the world. Southeast the United States is just the next step that they're all taking to get their technology closer to consumers and producers. So that we caught that trend, if you will. We have a lot of knowledge and experience we're gaining about what these hyperscalers need. Obviously, the things that they're going to resonate with in terms of where they locate include tax incentives, again, available land, available power, which is becoming a real issue for data center development and expansion. We'll probably talk about that, during the conversation part. But a significant impact on the growth of data center industry is available power in a particular region. Sustainability kind of rolls in. What we're starting to see is hyperscalers are beginning to work with utilities directly in order to reserve power for their growing data center needs. AI is also beginning to emerge now, and it's going to have massive impacts on the data center and power infrastructure. They're beginning to have conversations not only with data center providers, but energy producers to make sure that they've got the energy, the power they need to run their new facilities, as well as investing in a lot of clean energy to ensure that that clean energy is also a part of the mix and a growing part of the mix over time. So in a nutshell, that's what we're seeing. Enterprise data centers, we're seeing hyperscale data centers, international connectivity. Southeast is a burgeoning area, as many other parts of the world are. So we're happy to be in the middle of it and part of it.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for laying out some of these issues. I've got new questions in addition to the ones we already have posted on the page, but let's get the rest of our panelists into the conversation. Melissa, let's turn it over to you to talk a little bit about your take on this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Melissa Farney, I'm the Director of Marketing for Tech Fusions, and we are a data center owner and operator. What I like to say about us is that we are new to the race, but not to the space. So about 18 months in business, but founded by industry experts. Combined, our leadership team has built over 300 data centers, including some of Google's first. And as we think about the rise of data centers across the industry, this escalating growth that we're facing, I love when JLL puts out their state of the market report, and the latest edition came out about 2 weeks ago or so. The statistics are just overwhelming. The US co-location data center market has doubled in size in 4 years. Vacancy is at a record low of 3%. Demand is just going out the roof. Occupancy has increased at a 30% CAGR since 2020. And rents are on the rise as well, because we just can't even get there fast enough. And so keeping pace with the skyrocketing demand is absolutely critical. It requires rapid ability to deploy and scale at the same time. So the only way that you can keep pace with that demand is to be able to build at record speed. We used to say, build it and they will come. And I say, better get building, they're already here. So Tech Fusions has decided to go about this a little bit differently, ways that others have talked about, some have tested, but not really being done broadly out there. We're utilizing adaptive reuse, taking some shuttered industrial plants that still have an immense amount of power routed and allocated to them. So all around the world, we have 30 sites, some more actively being promoted than others right now. But last I counted, that was about 4 gigawatts of planned capacity, 300 megawatts of which is immediately available right now as we continue to ramp up those sites. So site reuse is enabling us to deploy very, very quickly with minimal modifications, and 25 megawatt phases about every 3 months per site. And just recognizing that when you bring in experts, and I mean hundreds of experts from power utilities, vendor manufacturers, construction crews, you can get a site online very, very quickly. In addition to the adaptive reuse, we're also tackling some sustainability impacts with power as we build in different microgrid power generation aspects into each of our sites. And so I'll get more into that commitment later in our conversation, but thank you.
No, man, this is great. Melissa, really, really excited to hear it again. Lots of questions in my mind, but I want to go to our last panelist, Hunter. When you survey this space, what do you think it's important to know, and and how the challenges IXPs and meet me rooms are dealing with are different from or similar to those that the data center industry is facing?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. Yeah, everything's going on in the industry, obviously super exciting. There's just a lot of talk and a lot of chatter. It's reached the fever pitch. It's reached bubble proportions. I even saw something posted a day or two ago that there's even a new term now, fake data centers, which I think is used to describe the oversubscription of demand based on speculation. And therein lies the issue that I think I want to talk about here. There's so many different things that we could talk about in different facets and layers of this, but what it really comes down to is the definition of words, terminology. A lot of people get together in rooms and they all say the same word, but they all have different understandings of that word or phrase. And then they can all leave that discussion with completely different understandings of what's going on. And aside from that, a lot of the complexity in this opportunity, again, that's a pretty broad word, is perspective. The perspective of different people in different places in time, physically, and space, looking in different directions. So I always like to say that the past, present, and the future are all happening simultaneously. All just depends on where you're standing and which way you're looking. And I say that in a network interconnection sense historically, like New York was ahead of Atlanta, Atlanta was ahead of Kansas City, and Kansas City is now ahead of, Wichita, for example, where I'm in the midst of building a new interconnection facility with Connected Nation and Wichita State University on the campus. So yeah, the term data center is pretty broad. It's very broad. It's been overused in similar ways to the word fiber or broadband. I mean, you could look at the word broadband and go to state by state, and there's a different definition in each state of what broadband is based on speeds and availability and whatnot. Fiber has all sorts of different definitions, the age, the type, the count, the availability, if it's available for lease as dark or an IRU, or if it's lit, all sorts of different things, rabbit holes to get stuck in. And again, there's not enough time on this panel or any panels to get down into all of the nuances. It's just really important to stress that in engaging in any conversation with anyone, you need to pre-qualify what it is that's being discussed and what's being said and the words that are being used so that everybody understands, at least to the greatest degree possible, what is being referred to. So the new favorite thing is AI. No one can finish a sentence almost without talking about AI. And it's super important to qualify which AI is being referred to. So it's basically three classes: LLM, large language model, which is also machine learning or ML, and then inference and generative. You have to understand the difference between those things and the drivers behind them in terms of the physics or the infrastructure that's required, that's being consumed and demanded and trying to be built for presently. And in broad strokes, LLM and ML are, the multi-hundred megawatt, gigawatt size things that we're hearing about and seeing that are having a significant impact on existing legacy data center markets, which served everything going all the way back to web hosting, which then became cloud, which became hyperscale, which is now AI. And again, the place and time perspectives, certain markets, Virginia, Loudoun County, Prince William, come to mind, where there's tremendous stress there because so much has been built. There's stress on the grid there. There's stress on the legacy system of operating. The way people have expectations of how things are purchased and timeframes for construction and permits and approvals, it does not meet the current demand for the need for this new phenomenon of LLM AI. But when you start getting into inference and generative, what doesn't really matter on the LLM side as much is latency. And it matters tremendously with inference and generative AI. And inference and generative AI, now all of a sudden, there's this big bright light moment where a lot of people that are scrounging for power anywhere they could find it in the existing metros, which are all overtaxed pretty much for the most part, are saying, hey, we should distribute this. It's safer, it's better. It should go to the rural places, the places where there's stranded power, trapped power. There's land, there's power, we could build AI. But if it's inference and generative AI that requires low latency, then you have to start paying attention to interconnection. Multi-tenant network neutral interconnection. There are many euphemisms for that too. Everyone pretty much knows me and my background in meet me rooms at 60 Hudson Street and 56 Marietta. Thanks for mentioning that. and others, 55 Marriott, many carrier hotels across the country. You see, carrier hotels are a different asset class. They're not data centers. Meet rooms in carrier hotels are where networks meet to interconnect. That's their primary function. It's typically a lower power, lower cooling density, different purpose. Single tenant, high density power, now in GPU, liquid cooling land. That is a completely different type of asset class. It's no different than residential homes. You got a ranch, you have a colonial or whatever, or buildings. You have an office building or a warehouse or a strip mall. These are different asset classes. They're designed differently. They have different requirements. They take different periods of time to build, and they cost different amounts. And unfortunately, data center being too general of a term is cast about and applied to practically everything. And I think wrongfully, because it confuses people. Certainly those on the inbound now hearing it, and I'm very well aware of this, working with Connected Nation as my partner in Connected Nation Internet Exchange Points. They're a nonprofit focused on rural broadband and closing the digital divide, and I've worked with them now for many years. And they are tied into every state in the country, governors, broadband office directors, congressmen, senators, very involved in grant writing, FCC broadband mapping, and through them, the joint venture we formed, CNIXP, and the relationship we have with many schools and municipalities, but foremost Wichita State University and the state of Kansas, which has been wonderful. It's really helped me understand what's going on in the United States, where this heavy concentration in the existing major data center markets, which is now overtaxed by LLM AI requirements, is now pushing everyone out into places like Kansas, and the phone's ringing. And folks in those states and the rural states are looking around for lessons learned from the other states, and what they're learning they don't like. So now NIMBY, that used to be applied pretty much exclusively to towers, now applies to data center. So it's becoming even harder. Added to the list of headwinds that the data center industry faces, and now with AI clearly going in a completely different direction, then core interconnection. So in a city where there's no carrier hotel, there can't be a meet me room. So how do you build one? And typically those cities, they're all interested in the internet. They want the internet. They want it faster, lower latency, cheaper, less expensive. So I help them design and build those facilities and bring networks to a place to meet physically that then starts to create the environment for a layer 2 Ethernet switch, also known as an internet exchange, that then facilitates ASs or core IP networks to meet and exchange traffic there, which reduces the latency. It's very, very important for inference and generative AI. Again, can't go down all the rabbit holes, not enough time. But to use all the stranded power in smaller chunks for inference and gen AI, you need local IP interconnection. It can't be backhauled 1,000 miles in either direction. Just it won't work. It won't render fast enough. And there's myriad headwinds, like I said, for the data center business, for permits, approvals, power, which was mentioned already, and lots of different issues with power, supply chain, materials, workforce shortages, skilled labor shortages for like electricians, like enough people to actually do all of this work, in the time frame that it's demanded, right? The cost of capital, massive issue, multi-billion-dollar loans at 15+% interest rates. Infrastructure projects can't service that rate of debt, which is why pretty much all of our infrastructure in this country is socialized. And add to that other issues now, like the digital realty fire that's actively occurring right now because of lithium ion batteries that are on fire. They can't be put out with water. I mean, lots of problems. That can't get, the interconnection business can't get caught up in that. Interconnection is its own thing, and it needs to be further developed out in the places where it isn't, so that those regions, real estate and power and everything, can be developed to help alleviate some of the burden that's I referred to as the major markets are experiencing. So I'll stop there. It's the definition of words and clear understanding of what lane everybody's in, and then talk about their specific problems in the context of the definition of those words in relation to where they're having that issue. Everybody's perspective is, wherever they're coming from, should be respected and listened to and understood, because we have a macro issue to solve for, You can't shove a square peg in a round hole all the time and think it's going to work. So,
well, wonderful. Thank you so much for laying all those issues out. I'm going to start with not necessarily one I previewed yet, but it's kind of a cute one. My kind of understanding sort of crystallized sometime over the past year that, the elements, right, like earth, air, fire, and water, they're kind of all combined in a data center, right? The earth, the real estate, the fire, the electricity, right? The air, I don't know whether we call that the internet, and water, right? Cooling is necessary. Looks as though we've oh no, you're still here. So I want to start off with Bill and Melissa, and just chime in on the broadband piece is kind of maybe the one that we at this community of Broadband Breakfast sort of take for granted and understand. But talk just, if you would, about the real estate, the power, and the water requirements of these big data centers, and what kinds of problems that creates and how they're managed. Who wants to tackle that first?
I can take a first stab from some experiences we have. The hyperscalers and other large tech companies are moving into new regions. There is a certain requirement they need to even start the conversations, and that is, you've already acquired, and this is probably going to change over time because they have such a voracious appetite. But right now, do you already have land? So you have to go out from a capital standpoint, acquire the land. Do you have power, reserve power? So reserving power sounds pretty easy. I could just go to Georgia Power and say, hey, we need 300 megawatts. Cool. DC Blocks is not the only company that is requesting power. Georgia Power recently went through a new, public hearings to try to expand their forecast for power expected by the end of the decade, 17 times what they had predicted back in 2022. Georgia Power did get approval through their regulatory authority to go ahead and expand to support up to 6.6 gigawatts of power by the end of the decade. But that doesn't come free to companies like us. So in addition to purchasing the land and reserving that, that power, we've got to commit to paying for the infrastructure up front. And so that means, substations we have to pay for, means the new transmission lines to bring that power to our sites is required. So we have to put out a lot of capital, and you could say risk. There is heavy demand, so we have high confidence that we'll find customers for these sites. The evidence is proving true, but you have to lay out a lot of capital. You have to make a lot of commitments. The downstream, again, Georgia Power is is one of many utilities across the country that is now seeing that surge in demand beyond their capacity. Utilities aren't necessarily the fastest moving enterprises you've ever experienced. Technology companies are used to moving fast. Utility companies not so much, especially regulated ones. So they're all kind of responding to this need for increased power rapidly. Companies like us in the middle are trying to do our best to reserve the land, reserve the power. We're doing our best to continue to influence our the local politicians and government folks to try to keep the tax incentives in place as well.
Let's just hone this a little bit more. I mean, voracious appetite for power. Hey, we're supposed to be getting the country less dependent on all of these, fossil fuels and what is the industry doing to kind of all these tech companies want to be carbon neutral by X year. Well, they're actually huge amounts more of energy being consumed because of these data centers. So what's the plan? What's the plan to kind of meet the capacity from an energy perspective, Bill and Melissa?
Yeah. So I would say, and Melissa's probably got some good insights on this, but a couple things are happening. One is, as I said, so in the short term, there's a lot of pressure. But when Georgia Power came out with their new, infrastructure resource plan, it included a significant expansion in clean energy. It's going to expand fossil fuel supplies as well for the short term. But what we're seeing long term is, again, the hyperscalers who are largely demanding this energy are going to the utilities, and when they do a power purchase agreement, they want to meet their requirements for sustainability and sustainable energy. Now, it might not happen in 2026, but they're going to put a power purchase agreement which actually funds the development of clean energy and accelerates the development of clean energy that'll meet their goal over some period of time. I don't know what the new metrics are. Might not be by 2026 or 28, but down the road, they're expecting to have more clean energy sources, and they're actually putting up the capital and commitments in order to induce that, energy production. And of course, there's also a shift to nuclear, back to nuclear, private nuclear facilities. We've seen some announcements from Oracle over the last day or two that they're going to actually now planning data centers with multiple small nuclear facilities on site. So there's going to be a significant public and private investment in developing nuclear energy as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So the power is accelerating quickly. Clean energy will be following it. It may take a little bit longer to reach that, full 100% clean energy sourcing, but there is investment behind it that could help bring it to fruition.
Melissa, what are some of your thoughts on this question of energy and environment, et cetera?
So energy and environment, let's take them together. So, we want to look at ways we manage efficiency and don't consume quite as much, ways that we also build for new generation and production. So some of what we're doing directly addresses both of those issues. So with our adaptive reuse of facilities, it is more efficient, more sustainable, much more cost conscious. So if you think about just from the land perspective, because your earlier question was like land, cooling, water, power. If you think about the land perspective, if you're eliminating the bulk of the construction process, you can actually reduce emissions by up to 80%. That's massive. Just think about the lack of impact on the environment from tearing down forests.
Can you just explain that? How do you eliminate 80% of your?
If the facility already exists. So we're taking, for example, some of our sites may have been old food and bev facilities. They may have been old smelting plants. Different sources of these very large industrial sites that already exist. They have weight-bearing capacity for the floor. They already have tons of power and backup power already slated there. It requires a little bit of reconfiguration on the inside to customize it for our use, but they already exist. So the structure's already there. We just need to outfit it. So it's being built in record time, very, very low impact on the environment. And then if you think about it, it's reduces not just the sustainable impact, but the cost to build and shortens the time to ROI for a data center to get up and running. So that's our reuse strategy when it comes to the land. But then we're actually doing a lot more with power. We're wanting to add additional capacity by building in microgrid power generation. So we're actually looking to build nat gas pipelines to generate hundreds more megawatts per site. So we'll have dual power from the utility and from our own generation. And so I'll refer to, there was a conference in Nova last week, actually, and a number of Dominion representatives spoke on different panels. Some of what they said, and it was different representatives that I'll quote for each, but they no longer believe that the long haul transmission lines make sense. They take too long to build, and we need more local generation and distribution. And another representative stated that they were actually beginning to decline applications that didn't offer to bring in something new, such as microgrid generation. So we're there. This is part of our plan, and we know that it's great for the community, it's great for the environment, it's great for the earth. So much more information coming out over the upcoming weeks, but our commitments are already in place firmly to become our own power provider and supplement what we're getting from the utility.
So is hyperscaler just a synonym for big tech company, or is there some other aspect of hyperscaling besides an Amazon or a Google or a Meta cloud service?
I've heard this debate come up a number of times. I have always used it to refer to one of the, say, big five: Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook. So That's how I refer to it. But there are some who think of co-location providers like me as truly hyperscale, because the scale at which we're building and deploying around the world truly is at an enormous level. But we're doing it to support some of those larger hyperscale.
Now, as a news community, I always feel empowered to ask the dumb questions. So here's my dumb question. What's going on in these data centers that's different from what's going on in a meet me room or a co-location facility? Let's let Hunter chime in first on this.
Well, GPUs versus passive patch panels for fiber interconnection. You know, my favorite optimal world, and it's just fiber panels, lots of them, organized behind glass, logos on the panels. And then if I have to have active elements, they're in a different area, and it's mostly all DWDM, core Ethernet, and some core routers. That's all I'd ever want to see in one of my facilities. No servers, no GPUs, no liquid cooling, none of that. Power density, the servers, that's your brain. The meet me room, that's your heart. All the veins are the fiber. And it's just physically different, has a different business model. It's designed different for power and cooling. Meet me rooms are stickier. They have better long-term margins. Data centers now, the AI, you're talking about hyperscale. I've heard this term, superscalers. All of them are building AI. Hyperscalers did cloud, and then there's some that are even in other businesses that weren't in the cloud business that didn't get to that scale. And the superscalers are building AI. All these new words are being invented. Like I said, definition of words, what does it all mean? Anybody that says they're building a data center and then they look at what I'm trying to build and they're like, oh, that's so small. Like, it's not a big check, right? So it doesn't attract, the big lenders who are really private equity out there writing big checks. These aren't multi-billion-dollar facilities. It's not a single tenant. You don't buy dirt, dig a hole, build a building, throw several hundred megawatts at it and call it a day, if you could even get it done on time or on budget. Multi-tenant interconnection facilities are just different.
Yeah.
They require different philosophy, different patience, different relationships and language.
Let me get Bill and Melissa's take on this question with specific reference to what's the brain activity, so to speak, to use the analogy Hunter's just said, that's going on in these data centers. Is it like all of Microsoft's, servers talking to one another, or is it Microsoft's and Amazon and Google's? Like, what's the brainwave activity, so to speak, that's going on in your data centers that's taking up all the capacity and the need for all the cooling and the electricity? So, Bill, you want to chime in?
This is where Hunter's comments are relevant. Well, which data center are you talking about? Because a single tenant hyperscale data center, which we are, building and entertaining customers for, it could vary. It could be, one of the data centers within their cloud region. So they're running cloud infrastructure, which runs probably thousands of servers of a single type, as well as the connectivity into it. We have other, hyperscalers that are building network nodes, and they're just, they just need maybe they don't need 500, megawatts or 300 megawatts, but they only need, 10 megawatts to just have connectivity around a particular region that's connecting to their larger data centers. Multi-tenant data centers, which we also build, we bring in multiple enterprises. The enterprises bring in their own equipment. The brainwaves are dependent on our customers. We just providing the space and the power and the connectivity to them, and what's in there and what they're doing with it is all up to them. So, and cable landing stations really are just, and carrier hotels are really just communications hubs. It's mostly carriers and communications infrastructure that's in there, carrying the data off that subsea cable, connecting it to terrestrial networks, and then feeding it off to somebody else. So the brain waves of a data center depend on the type of data center, and they're growing in difference. And I would argue from the requirements we're seeing for what I'll call the standard hyperscale data center, how I might define that is a single tenant, a million square feet or bigger, 200 megawatts of power and more. And there's only a handful of customers or companies that will actually require that level. But the next generation of AI data centers, I would argue, aren't going to fit into the design models that we're building for today. Even the cloud infrastructure, the cloud regions and cloud servers that are being put in data centers, The design, the density, the type of cooling. You forget about air cooling. It's going to be liquid and maybe liquid to the chip. All those things are going to change when you get to the densities required for for a true AI data center. And again, there's multiple data centers supporting AI infrastructure. Yeah. I'll add one other quick thing, which is connectivity, because when we build a data center, and this is why we got into the fiber business, those hyperscalers aren't going to connect to 56 for their for their data. The traditional internet, carrier-based internet, doesn't have the capacity for their needs and doesn't go where they want them to go, because they need very high capacity connectivity from each of their data centers, which means they need dark fiber to their data centers, which is why we have this east-west route from Myrtle Beach to Atlanta, and we can build a lateral for all the regional data centers that we're building for our hyperscale customers. So, connectivity and high capacity connectivity is also a vital ingredient to what's being required.
I certainly want Melissa to weigh in, but I also want to get our questioners in too. And we've got a good one from Felicity Behringer. She asks, what would be the role of geothermal plants in the data center build-out demand for electricity? Meta and Google recently announced such partnerships. Will this idea accelerate, or is it a one-off because of the time needed to get geothermal plants online? You want to take that one first, Melissa?
I'm trying to understand what they mean by geothermal plants, like nat gas.
Heat from the earth that spins turbines and generates electricity.
I think we will see more of that. I actually really don't want to go further into it. So I think we will see a lot more of that. We will see people building many sorts of power gen, geothermal. That's I like the term. We'll see much more from nat gas. We'll see a lot more nuclear, private nuclear. I think people will begin to build this in any way that they possibly can to get the power that's on site. And you will see the hyperscalers who have the reserves and the, I guess I'll call it the risk acceptance in order to test these new designs, be the first movers in this type of technology.
What are the current modes of electricity? Like if you did a pie chart of electricity now, what would it be? And like, where is it going over 5 years?
Well, it depends. It depends where you're located, because so much of your power is ultimately coming from your utility and how they generate power. Those who are building their own, you'll get some who build solar or wind, but it's rare. It's usually going to come from something like nat gas. People are looking into hydrogen. A lot of it still, though, is utility based, and that's where we're limited, because each region can be so completely different from the other. What works in some markets to get power from water could be the bulk of what you're getting from your utility, and that's highly renewable and fantastic. Would you bother building in your own generation if your renewable power is already coming from your utility? Probably not. You're already really doing great things with your location. Not every region has that opportunity available. And so it's really very location dependent for what you can build in to supplement. Nat gas, for example, you might not have pipeline within hundreds of miles. That's not an option to you. So very regionally based. And I would say look at each market.
Okay, let's take another great question. Stephen Ross asks, what's the argument for tax incentives other than that other locations offer them? This seems like a profitable business that attracts capital and does not create huge numbers of on-site jobs. So again, let's take the hard question, right? Why should any state be giving tax credits, tax incentives for data center operators? Bill, do you want to take that?
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing this firsthand. Both Georgia and South Carolina offer tax incentives for data centers, and they both recently questioned it a little bit for the same reasons. Do we really need incentives to bring in data centers to our region, and look at the power infrastructure enhancements we're going to need to make? And here's our a couple answers to it. Let's talk about it at the community level, because we have a particular example where We're building in a suburb of Atlanta on the east side of Atlanta. And we were offered tax incentives, and we did an economic review with the community in a public hearing to say, look, here's the bottom line. We're going to bring a lot of jobs for construction of the data center. And when we say a lot of jobs, it's probably going to take somewhere between 200 and 400 laborers over a period of about 5 years to build this, 4-phase facility, which is going to bring some local, employment for that period of time. That's still pretty good investment and new jobs for 5 years. That's not permanent. And when we're running it fully developed, we'll employ about 25, 30 workers. And that's not many jobs. However, even with the tax incentives, we showed them the economic results over a 10-year period with the tax incentives. Our project was going to generate $164 million to the county, unburdened. And when I say unburdened, okay, we got 25 or 30 employees. We don't have any traffic. We don't have to expand the roads. We're not going to bring a lot of people in who are going to burden the school. So all that money goes right to their ability to expand their own local services. Prior to us coming in, a warehouse tried to purchase the same land. And they said, you know what, it's going to be traffic 24/7. There's trucks coming in all the time. We're worried about noise and pollution. We're going to have to expand the roadways. They're going to bring in a bunch of folks. We're going to immediately have to build schools that we don't have money for right now. So they declined that project and they accepted the data center project. So locally, there was, even with the tax incentives, that was worth it to them. When you talk about at the state level, these hyperscalers want to be in a region. They do not need to be in your state. So if Georgia decides to repeal the tax incentives, if South Carolina decides to repeal the tax incentives, they won't go there. They'll go to a place where they can get the tax incentives. But there is substantial long-term investment. When you build data centers, then you also have to build the fiber network infrastructure, which supports other businesses in the region. When we built our east to west route from Myrtle Beach to Atlanta, we passed 24 communities in South Carolina and Georgia, most of them rural. We're providing a middle mile access to a bunch of, rural communities that are trying to get broadband access to the internet exchange point in Atlanta. We built the superhighway right through their town.
Let's include the discussion about NIMBYism, not in my backyard, right? Which is obviously a big and concerning issue on a lot of sectors of our economy, including housing, but it's kind of come to the data center space. And let's actually use a question from Reda Habib. She specifically asks Hunter, what are the factors to consider for creating new carrier hotels? So let's let Hunter start off. Like, what's NIMBYism like? Do you experience it for IXPs or not? I mean, you're basically saying there shouldn't be any concerns about it, but I'd also like Bill and Melissa's take on how extensive the concern about building data centers is in the world you two occupy. So Hunter first.
Yeah, so network neutral interconnection facilities or internet exchange points don't experience NIMBYism because they don't fall into these power density, water consumption. I'm not trying to build a nuclear plant. That's very, central to the current AI data center needs and conversation. So everyone wants the internet. Nobody wants all that other stuff, even though the two things are related and we're all industry people and know that. But the reality is the form factor, the amount of power required for network interconnection doesn't, raise to the level of not in my backyard, but, gigawatt size or 200, 500 megawatt, whatever, million square foot buildings with no windows. If there's just one in a state where there's nothing, maybe they'll do it. But if you're in a very highly packed, densely populated data center area, like anywhere around Loudoun and Virginia, those people down there are fed up with it. And they're getting real vocal about it. So that's catching on. And other states, governors and politicians are listening to that because they're seeing the pushback. And that's what's spreading. That's where NIMBY is coming from in the community basis. But I just wanted to mention, I think what DC Blocks does and has done for years is great. Because of what Bill just mentioned, it's unique to them in many ways. The assets that they have and the understanding of building fiber, back to 55, 56 Marietta in Atlanta, building data centers, building regen, ILAs on the long haul fiber that are actually neutral meet points. I love that idea. I came up with that years back too, and they're actually doing it. Cable landing station, love it. You know, I'm a partner at NJFX. We started doing that a decade ago. Anything like that, that's neutral, multi-tenant network interconnection facilities that allow for laterals, basically short haul access, you want to call it whatever, middle mile in
Right.
for local peering for those towns and schools. That wins favor for DC blocks. That helps them get their projects for data centers and whatnot approved because they're going to bring fiber past a lot of towns and into that town. That's going to help businesses and schools and libraries and everyone. That's really great. Just building big, giant macro data centers without bringing that local community interconnection dimension doesn't win a lot of favor. So I think NIMBYism, well, it's real, might not impact DC blocks the same way because they can bring that value to the table, whereas a lot of others are having issues getting their projects approved. There's a lot of competition, but also what else are they doing for the local community? The jobs don't show up and the tax incentives, which is the prior question. I've heard all of this stuff. I mean, I was out in Iowa in 2018 where ChatGPT was born. And there's big articles about this. The city of Des Moines didn't even know how much water was consumed by that Microsoft data center for a year and a half after. And it was as much water as the whole city consumed. And they panicked because they're not used to metering and monitoring things like this. These data centers are a magnitude higher than what used to be. So now everybody's super sensitive because they don't want egg on their face. There's a lot of like political risk here from the local people that think brownouts and blackouts are going to happen and they won't have any water. And that needs to be addressed by some sort of PR function this industry is devoid of currently at the AI data center super scale level, which I've been saying for years.
So Melissa, let's get your reaction to that and what are ways to quote mitigate risks, not just from a PR perspective, but in reality, like bring your own energy. Does that help? Like bring your own nuclear plant. Does that help or hurt? Talk a little bit about the hard questions that need to be solved by data centers when it comes to NIMBYism.
Okay, well, I was hoping to get Bill another second, but so speaking broadly, our data center specifically isn't facing the NIMBYism because we're already taking facilities that exist in someone's backyard. They're already there. But wearing my mission critical hat, because I write about this issue very broadly, that gives me a perspective to look at everybody's infrastructure and what they're building. This is a major problem that we need to solve as an industry. And I will say everybody has their own challenges. So with fiber, think about what it takes to permit across like hundreds of miles of rural lands. Nobody wants you trenching outside of their house. When it comes to cable landing stations, if you think a data center has it tough, try putting one in a state park or a retirement community where you have maybe save the sea turtles advocates. So everybody's going to face their own issues, and data centers similarly. Bringing your own power absolutely helps to say, hey, look, I'm providing this back, and not only for myself, but I'm going to offer to feed it into the local power grid so that there's more power available for everyone here. That does make waves, but what we have to do is message our own importance as an industry, because no one's out there blaming Ford for manufacturing vehicles. We just appreciate that there's a company that recognizes our need for transportation. We have to start selling our services the exact same way, because data centers are absolutely crucial for the operation of online services. And they're providing, literally everybody here on this call is providing some aspect of the physical infrastructure that's powering the digital world we all continue to live in. It's indispensable. Right. And we have to start talking about it.
Just a quick add on to that. I know we're running out of time.
Bill, I'm going to give you everyone 30 seconds to close out. The time is sped by. We've definitely focused on problems, but go ahead and address that as well as what you'd like to see in the future. So let's just go Bill, then Hunter, then Melissa. We'll go back to you, close out.
I mean, building on Melissa's comments, I mean, digital infrastructure is the foundation for future economies. Yes, the data centers themselves, they're only holding maybe a single tenant, maybe multiple tenant, but the digital infrastructure, the high capacity new fiber routes that are going to be developed, around that data center transporting is available to everyone in the region. The power expansion, being able to expand your power grid, having more reliable power, having higher capacity power, having more green energy is based on investments in these areas. So the smart cities and the smart counties of the world will see the future economic benefit of this investment, and they'll approve tax incentives. Virginia, who's out of power in many areas and trying to struggle with all the demand in their area for data centers, they're still offering incentives because they see the vision of the future economy that digital infrastructure is going to support for them.
Hunter, final thoughts?
Yeah, big topic. Everybody said, it's all about location. Everybody's got different perspectives and issues to deal with. But broadly speaking, just because a data center gets built somewhere doesn't mean that the local internet gets any better. And that is a huge disconnect that governors across the country still fail to really grasp. And a lot of data centers have been built with massive tax incentives that didn't result in any positive impact to local broadband, to use the term. But to them, that's the internet. Nothing got better because somebody got the land, built the building, got the incentives and the power, and backhauled everything to the next big interconnection city, not that rural state that the data center got built in, which is another reason why. And these are lessons learned by the governors of these rural states. They're like, no, we're not giving up our power and our water and all these tax incentives for the internet not to get any better in our state. And that's what I've been focusing on. Not to say that all these other issues aren't real and all this stuff is important and valuable and whatever. It's all great. But there are a lot of folks like governors of states and directors of broadband offices that need to be educated properly, and they're not liking just the word salad that they don't understand.
Right.
They want to get something actually accomplished for the local people, their constituents, the voters.
And as a reminder, this video will be available at the link I just posted in the Zoom, and for those watching on our other channels, it's available on the Broadband Breakfast /Broadband Live page. Melissa, we're going to give you the last word for the future, the rise, and current big central role of data centers. What do you think we need to be focused on over the next 5 years here?
Well, over the next 5 years, it's power and utilization. And so as data centers are on the rise, and we face a lot of pressures from NIMBYism to how to grow for AI, how to get power for all of this, I will leave everyone with the lasting thoughts that there is a direct correlation between energy consumption and a country's wealth. And as data centers provide the backbone for the digital economy, it's a direct correlation. It will need power, but it's ultimately building a better world. It's boosting employment. It's boosting GDP. It enables our industrial output and quality of life. And we can't do any of what we want to do every single day without them.
Well, again, we've just scratched the surface of a very rich topic. Thank you for being with us, to our panelists and to those who attended. Again, this recording is available, as with all Broadband Breakfast Live online. Make sure to check out the panelist links, which talk about some of the work Hunter and others are doing. And don't miss, next week, we're going to be talking about broadband measurement, next steps at our weekly Wednesday Broadband Breakfast Live online and in person digital infrastructure investment in Washington. Don't miss the 6th annual summit, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.